These are people who gave fentanyl to a man, watched him die, and then sent that same batch of fentanyl to the United States. They know that they are poisoning and killing Americans. They just don't care because they make billions of dollars doing it. In Mexico, they fed their enemies alive to tigers, electrocuted them, waterboarded them, and shot them at close range with a .50 caliber machine gun.
You've heard of El Chapo, the infamous Mexican narco lord who escaped from prison 3 times, built a billion-dollar narco empire, and waged a bloody war against his rivals. But do you know his sons, the Chapitos? They are the heirs of his legacy, and they are not afraid to challenge anyone who stands in their way, not even the US government. Recently, the United States government has accused the Chapitos of producing and smuggling a lethal drug that has caused a public health crisis in America, fentanyl. The US government has indicted them on multiple counts of narco trafficking, money laundering, and several counts of murder. But the Chapitos are not backing down. They have sent a letter to the US government, and you won't believe what the Guzmán brothers have to say to the US authorities. In the underworld of narco cartels, losing a leader is often a death sentence for the criminal organization. Over the years, we have seen a common trend where many cartels have been destroyed or disintegrated into warring factions after their bosses were either killed or captured by the authorities. That's exactly what happened to the Medellin cartel, a once dominant force in Colombia's criminal underworld. But its reign of power came to an abrupt end following the demise of its infamous leader, Pablo Escobar, in 1993. Similarly, the Los Zetas were thrown into disarray and fragmented into different hostile factions in the aftermath of their top leaders' arrests in the 2010s. Following this same trend, the Gulf cartel's reign over the borderlands waned significantly following the 2003 capture of Osiel Cárdenas Guillén. The capture of its chief not only weakened the cartel's grip on its territories, but also diminished its standing in the international criminal hierarchy. But there is one cartel that has survived the fall of its leader and remained strong and united: the Sinaloa cartel, Mexico's most prominent and most resilient narco-trafficking organization. When its legendary boss, Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán, was extradited to the US in 2017 after escaping prison and being recaptured thrice, many thought his cartel would follow the fate of the others. But they were wrong. His 4 eldest sons, known as the Los Chapitos, stepped up and took charge of their father's business.
From the moment Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán was arrested in 2016 after a firefight with Mexican commandos, his sons were destined to assume the throne of the Sinaloa cartel.
These brothers inherited not just their father's notorious crown, but also his infamous reputation for pushing the boundaries of the narco trade.
The Chapitos pioneered the manufacture and trafficking of the deadliest drug our country has ever faced. And they are responsible for the massive influx of fentanyl into the United States.
Recently, 2 of the Guzmán brothers, Iván Archibaldo Salazar and Jesus Alfredo Salazar, alongside 23 other associates, have been indicted on charges of flooding the US with cheap and deadly fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is wreaking havoc on the lives of millions of Americans.
And now 3 sons of El Chapo, known as the Chapitos, are charged. One of them has been arrested in Mexico, and the U.S. government is rewarding up to $10 million for the whereabouts of the other 2. 25 other Sinaloa members are also charged across all facets of this sophisticated operation in a major strike against America's fentanyl crisis.
In a separate but related case, their other brother, Ovidio Guzmán Lopez, alias the Mouse, faces charges for his alleged role in steering the Sinaloa cartel towards the fentanyl trade.
Is their organization, the Sinaloa cartel, that has helped in what is an extraordinary and appalling surge in fentanyl. Fentanyl, which is way deadlier than the drugs that preceded it, like heroin.
The indictment reveals how the Sinaloa cartel, under the command of El Chapo's sons, has adapted to the changing demands of the narco market. The cartel has shifted its focus from dope to fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is up to 100 times more potent than morphine and can be easily manufactured in clandestine labs. These labs, as described by Mike Vigil, the former head of international operations for the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, are far from the high-tech facilities one might envision. They are rudimentary at best, characterized by metal tubs and wooden paddles and shovels for chemical mixing. a stark contrast to the polished image of pharmaceutical-grade superlabs. But despite their lack of sophisticated equipment, the cartel's cooks are capable of producing an astonishing volume of counterfeit pills, up to 100,000 daily. The Sinaloa cartel has exploited this fentanyl crisis in the U.S., which has its roots in the overprescription of oxycodone, a legal painkiller. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, as the U.S. authorities tightened the regulations on oxycodone, many users turned to dope as a cheaper and more accessible alternative. The Sinaloa cartel was ready to supply this dope, but soon realized that fentanyl offered a more lucrative and efficient option. You see, fentanyl can be produced at a fraction of the cost of dope, and a small amount can yield a large number of pills. The court document from their April 2023 indictment showed that with just $800 worth of precursor chemicals, the cartel could produce at least $640,000 worth of fentanyl pills. With this staggering profit margin, it became much easier for them to buy over the authorities and have them watch their backs as they ran their criminal empire, smuggling and distributing these poisonous pills with impunity. These pills are masqueraded as well-known prescription medications like Xanax, Percocet, or oxycodone, and then trafficked across the border to the US, and then sold to unsuspecting users who often have no idea what they are ingesting. The low cost and high potency of fentanyl have made it a highly profitable business for the cartel, but also a highly dangerous one for the users and the public.
Often hidden in common prescription painkiller pills, the Justice Department and top drug enforcement officials say the cartel ruthlessly worked to curate the most potent form of the man-made drug.
You see, fentanyl is so powerful that a tiny dose can be lethal, especially for those who are not accustomed to opioids. The margin of error between a dose that intoxicates and the one that kills is extremely narrow, and many users overdose without realizing it, turning an intended high into a potential death sentence for the user.
These are people who gave fentanyl to a man, watched him die, and then sent that same batch of fentanyl to the United States. They know that they are poisoning and killing Americans. They just don't care, because they make billions of dollars doing it.
This fentanyl epidemic has contributed to a staggering increase in drug-related deaths in the U.S. According to the latest data, more than 107,000 Americans died from drug overdoses between August 2021 and August 2022, with synthetic opioids being the main culprit. Also, the DEA's seizure of over 57 million fentanyl-laced counterfeit pills in a year, as disclosed in the New York indictment, shows the magnitude of the problem. To protect and expand their fentanyl empire, El Chapo's sons have resorted to extreme violence and brutality. The New York indictment details some of the horrific acts that they have committed, such as feeding their enemies to their pet tigers and brutalizing Mexican federal agents.
In Mexico, they fed their enemies alive to tigers, electrocuted them, waterboarded them, and shot them at close range with a .50 caliber machine gun.
These acts of savagery show their determination to maintain their power and avoid a possible power vacuum within the cartel, especially after their father was captured and extradited to the United States. The ambitions of Los Chapitos extend beyond maintaining the status quo. They envision transforming Mexico from a mere passageway for Chinese-produced fentanyl into a significant manufacturing hub. By establishing a network of hidden labs throughout Sinaloa, they aim to saturate the market with their lethal concoction, ensuring their dominance in the fentanyl trade. Yet, the manufacturing of fentanyl is merely one facet of their expansive operation. A critical aspect lies in the acquisition of precursor chemicals from China, which the Los Chapitos have aggressively pursued to sustain their production of this addictive substance. However, in a sudden move to defend themselves and clear their names of all these accusations, the Los Chapitos sent a letter to the Mexican and United States governments through a famous Mexican journalist, Azucena Uresti. But what could the Guzmán brothers possibly have to say in this letter? On April 14, 2023, the United States Justice Department announced that it had filed new charges against these three Guzmán and other Sinaloa cartel leaders for trafficking fentanyl and other narcotics into the U.S. In response to this indictment, on May 4, 2023, the Los Chapitos sent a letter to the Mexican and United States governments, addressing some of the most shocking allegations against them, such as vowing to flood the U.S. with fentanyl and feeding their enemies to tigers. The Guzmán brothers denied any involvement in these activities and said that they were being persecuted and scapegoated by the authorities and the media. Los Chapitos said they are not the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel and that they do not parade themselves as such. They also claimed that the fentanyl being produced currently in Sinaloa has a name on it, and that name, they said, is not theirs. We have never produced, manufactured, or commercialized fentanyl, or any of its derivatives, the letter reads, contradicting the accusation leveled at them by United States authorities in the recent court indictment. We have never worked with fentanyl, although there are many in Sinaloa that do produce it, and that's why we have seen the recent seizures. But those laboratories have a name and a last name. Do some research. You would only need to send a single agent to Sinaloa. They then warned against those who are using their name to attract favors. The use of our name by other people to get rid of problems, avoid problems, or solve problems is becoming a real danger for us. If they are caught, whoever they are, they should face up to their own situation without involving us. We will always look out for our own safety and that of our family. We didn't choose to be where we are. No one can choose their birthplace. We would have liked to have chosen a different life with a good education, but that was denied at the time due to the hunt for our father. The Los Chapitos also refuted the allegation that they fed their victims alive to their pet tigers. According to them, they have never owned any tigers, let alone feeding them with human beings. But how credible are these claims? Are Los Chapitos telling the truth, or are they trying to manipulate public opinion and evade justice? To answer these questions, we need to look at the bigger picture and examine the complex and murky relationship between the narco cartels, the Mexican government, and the U.S. agencies. And to do that, we need to listen to one of the most controversial and outspoken figures in American history, John McAfee.
Did find out that the Minister of National Defense was the largest drug trafficker in all of Central America.
This is a bold and shocking statement, but is there any evidence to back it up? Well, as it turns out, there are many reports and investigations that have exposed the links between the narco cartels and the authorities on both sides of the border. One of the key figures in this web of corruption is Ismael Mario Zambada Garcia, better known as El Mayo, the co-founder of the Sinaloa cartel. El Mayo is one of the most elusive and powerful narco lords in the world, who has managed to evade capture for decades, despite being on the most wanted list of both Mexico and the US. But how has he done it? Well, by forging alliances and deals with the very people who are supposed to catch him. El Mayo's connections with law enforcement agencies go back to his early days in the narco trade, when he met a mysterious man named Antonio Cruz Vasquez, who helped him gain an advantage over his competitors. Vasquez was a former Cuban intelligence officer who defected to the US and was working for the CIA, according to some reports. He was also a narco trafficker who supplied El Mayo with weapons and contacts he needed. He was arrested in 1978 by the Nevada narcotics officers, who found out about his ties with the CIA, but he refused to talk about them. It is likely that through Vasquez, El Mayo established a relationship with the CIA and later with the Mexican Army and the DEA. Over the years, there have been many allegations and evidence of the collaboration between the Sinaloa cartel and the authorities. For example, in 2009, the U.S. National Public Radio reported that the Mexican government was helping the Sinaloa cartel take over the Juarez Valley area from the Juarez cartel by providing them with intelligence, protection, and weapons. The reason for this was that the government allegedly preferred to deal with one dominant cartel rather than many smaller and more violent ones. By working with the Sinaloa cartel, the government reportedly hoped to reduce the level of violence and maintain some control over the narco trade. However, the Sinaloa cartel, in turn, benefited from the reduced competition and the increased power and influence. This is probably why the Sinaloa cartel is the largest and most successful cartel in the world, with operations in over 50 countries. So, what does this all mean for the letter that the Los Chapitos sent to the public? Well, it means we must take their claims with a grain of salt and consider the possibility that they are lying or exaggerating things. It is possible that they are trying to portray themselves as innocent victims in order to gain sympathy and support from the people, and to undermine the credibility of the authorities and the media. It is also possible that they are trying to divert attention from their own crimes and to shift the blame to their enemies. However, there's also the possibility that they are telling the truth, at least partially, and that they are indeed being persecuted and scapegoated by the government, which wants to use them as a distraction from their their own involvement in the narco trade. In any case, the letter raises more questions than answers and shows how complex and murky the narco war is. It also shows how this war affects not only Mexico, but also the US and the rest of the world. The US has been fighting the war on drugs for decades, spending billions of dollars and losing thousands of lives. But the question is, has it been effective? Has it reduced the supply and demand of narcotics? Has it made the streets safer? Or has it only made things worse by fueling violence, corruption, and human rights violations? These are some of the questions we must ask ourselves and demand answers from our leaders, because the drug war is not just a Mexican problem or an American problem. It is now a global problem, and it affects us all. The letter from Los Chapitos is not the only evidence that suggests that the Sinaloa cartel has been in bed with the authorities for a long time. There are also many testimonies and documents that reveal the extent of the collaboration and the corruption that has been going on behind the scenes. One of these testimonies came from Manuel Fierro Mendez, a former police captain who acted as the spokesman for El Chapo in his dealings with the US authorities. He stated during his trial that he had a symbiotic relationship with them, in which each side made use of the other. Fierro Mendez would provide tips and confirm leads for the US authorities, while agents from immigration and customs enforcement would arrest Sinaloa's enemies. Another source of information came from leaked emails, which revealed statements from a Mexican diplomat who suggested that Mexican officials believed that the United States was helping the Sinaloa cartel's narco-smuggling efforts into the United States and protecting the cartel while attacking its rivals. The diplomat said that this was part of a strategy to reduce violence between Mexican narco cartels and to create a balance of power in the region. The BBC also aired a documentary in March 2015 called This World: Secrets of Mexico's Drug War, which discussed the US government's Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, Operation Fast and Furious, which facilitated the sale of firearms by licensed dealers to illegal buyers working on behalf of Mexican narco cartel leaders, in particular the Cali cartel. The operation was supposed to track the guns and catch the kingpins, but it backfired, as many of the guns ended up being used in crimes and killings, including the murder of a US Border Patrol agent. The BBC also covered the story of Vicente Zambada, the son of El Mayo, who claimed that the leaders of the Cali cartel had provided information to US federal agents about rival Mexican narco gangs in exchange for immunity from prosecution under a deal between the Mexican and US governments. During his trial, Zambada's court filings claimed that federal DEA agents gave him, El Chapo, and other Cali leaders complete freedom to operate their narco business without interference as long as they snitched on other cartels. According to Zambada's attorney, for a long time, Sinaloa leaders helped authorities capture or kill thousands of rivals. However, prosecutors denied having signed a deal with Zambada. Instead, they admitted that the US had assigned a cooperation agreement with a different Sinaloa cartel leader. According to them, any agreement with a cartel leader is controversial, but may sometimes be deemed necessary. So, the question now is, why are the authorities now cutting ties with their alleged long-term partners, the Sinaloa cartel, by indicting them on fentanyl charges? What has changed? Is it because the Sinaloa cartel has become too powerful and dangerous and posed a threat to the national security of both countries? Is it because the authorities wanted to show that they are serious about fighting the narco war and that they are not compromised by the cartels? Or is it that there's something else going on? Something that we don't know about? Something that could explain the letter from Los Chapitos? You see, the letter from Los Chapitos is a puzzling and intriguing piece of evidence that raises more questions than answers. It shows that the Sinaloa cartel is not willing to take the blame for the fentanyl crisis and that they are trying to distance themselves from the crimes. It also shows that they are aware of the public perception of them and that they are trying to influence it. But can we really trust any word that comes out of their mouth? Could it be possible that they are actually telling the truth and that there is a new narco cartel that the authorities do not know about, and that is using the Sinaloa cartel as a scapegoat? Could it be possible that this new cartel is behind the fentanyl epidemic and that they are trying to take over the narco market from the Sinaloa cartel? Or could it be possible that the Sinaloa cartel is lying and that they are still involved in the fentanyl trade and that they are trying to cover their tracks and avoid prosecution? Well, we don't know for sure, but we do know that the letter from Los Chapitos has profound implications, especially for the United States and its war on drugs. If the Sinaloa cartel is telling the truth, then it means that the Mexican and US authorities have been chasing the wrong cartel and that they have been missing the real enemy, who could even be more dangerous and ruthless than the Sinaloa cartel. But what if the Guzmán brothers are lying? Well, in any case, only time will tell. Do you think the US authorities have been secretly working with the Sinaloa cartel? Or do you think the Guzmán brothers are just trying to drum up public sympathy for themselves? Please feel free to share your thoughts with us in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, please do well to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Thank you for watching, guys. Until next time, stay safe.